So after the trip to Australia, then from Argentina to Australia, I get this bonus of a week or more off here. And so Coolum Hyatt Resort, sensational. If you want to do everything that's just laid on a plate for you, it's fantastic. Swimming and golf, and we won't talk about golf, but... and then I went up to Fraser Island and stayed at the Kingfisher there, and I've never seen anything like it. I was in Buenos Aires, and someone said they'd just come back from there. You have to go there, this sand island. And I thought, well, it's sand and it's an island. What else can it be? But I mean, the moment I arrived, the stunning thing was that you're just seeing this, well, what I call jungle. It looks like jungle. And it's very weird because I was watching a program on Cuba the other day, and the last beach in the Caribbean is about to be developed, and it's going to be a resort. And I'm just going, oh no, I've seen what's happened to the Cayman Islands, I've seen what's happened to all these places. And I couldn't believe this pristine jungle type thing with just a hint of some tin roofs in there, and it's a real eco type thing, you know. So you go yomping around the trails and go up to, and they have all these lakes which are like called perched lakes, and they're sitting in the top of sand dunes relying on the rainfall. And you come upon this place called Lake Mackenzie, and you come out of the trees and just go, this is aquamarine, beautiful turquoise water, and it's fresh. You just jump in and you can drink it, which I did, buckets full. It was wonderful. And it's just, there's not a sign, there's no Coke or beer stands or anything like that. There's no hot dog stands. It's just what everyone dreams of, finding those places, and it's just incredible. Then you go through a rainforest. There's all these micro ecological systems, and they're incredible. And everyone drives along the beach, and it's over 100 kilometres long. And I learned all about the dingoes and stuff like that. They've got the purest breed of dingoes in Australia, and they look just like any mischievous dog to me, because they were nicking life jackets out of the boats and popping the inflatable boats, just sinking their teeth in, and all you hear was this, and the things go down. And all in all, just stuffing as much as I can into this trip. And you don't get that sort of privilege very often. You know, you go to the cities and you have to do the promotion, and then you do the concerts, and then you move on. So it's only a chance that you have every now and again to jump into something like that. And I was like a kid, you know, just reveling in it. And I shall come back, definitely, if I get a chance, bring the family.
It's a great part of the world.
Yeah, sensational, this whole area. I wanted to, you know, it's only when you get to Australia and you realise how immense the whole thing is that you realise you can't do Australia like the Americans do England, you know, in 2 or 3 days.
Well, there was talk about you actually doing a bit of a walkabout over a few days and getting to Ayers Rock, but I think it's a little bit further than you realise.
Well, it is, and I've got... Yeah, that was good.
You ready?
Yeah,
Right, back on again.
Okay.
Ian, you'd mentioned to me that you'd consider going, you know, while you're in Queensland, heading to the Northern Territory and seeing Ayers Rock.
Yeah, well, I sort of built it into my thinking, and I'd forgotten about the press conference that was in Sydney. So I was saying to the guys in some bar somewhere in Buenos Aires or somewhere in Brazil, so, you know, this is going to be great because you guys are going to Perth and I'm going over to the East Coast, and but I want to go and see Ayers Rock. So anyone, I'll meet you for a beer in Alice Springs. It sounds, you know, like the sort of thing you could do. And then I'm looking at the map and going, that's not far. That's 400 kilometres. Yeah, well, I could drive that. And then people saying, well, you can get a little plane there. It might take you, it might be a little, if you want to spend the time appreciating it. And then we were going to drive from Ayers Rock to Perth. It's only about 1,000.
It's probably about 5,000 miles.
Clicks. No, it's not that far, is it? I did it by my thumb on the map, and it looked like it would take 2 or 3 days.
Across Europe.
Yeah, well, that's easy. I mean, I'm used to 17,000-mile drives. It's not a problem, but I just don't have enough time. Anyway, the country is immense. That's the point. I mean, and so we're going to have to do Ayers Rock next time, and all the, you know, the Northern Territory and everything else. But the Australian psyche is another great thing, because I was hearing today, going back to Fraser Island for a second, there's this thing on the beach, and they all go fishing, and there's hundreds of them, and they take their beer out there, and they don't want to be walking backwards and forwards, so they got a bucket. They cut the head off the fish, stick it in the bucket, so it's dripping with blood. And they've got the beers and everything else, and the rods and whatever. And they're walking bait for the sharks and everything, and you can see the waves going like that. And in the transparency of the waves, you can see the fish going by, and the shark, and they're saying shark in the gutter or whatever they call it. And so and they're all standing there, just like waiting to be eaten. It's incredible.
But I think they lose a fair few a year, but it never gets publicised. If you ask the locals, I think
they lose a few, do they?
They do lose a few each year.
Well, they're asking for it, but it's typically Australian.
Off the road, you don't get a chance that often. What do you normally do when you head home to the UK?
When I get home, I do exactly what my wife tells me to do, and that's the general way of things. There's a list of chores, but in terms of my interests, I write by... It's a love of mine. I write a lot, so I write every day on the road, sometimes 20 pages, and it's not necessarily aimed at doing anything. At any given time, I'm working on 2 or 3 different projects. I'm working on a couple of books at the moment, or I'm doing things that have really annoyed me during the day, or really made me laugh, or turned me on, whatever.
That's your
a subject. It's like
that's your therapy.
It's kind of therapy, I suppose, but it's also it's a combination between a hobby and a job, I suppose. And also, I like to capture the moment, the humour or the pathos of the moment, so that when I'm flicking through these books, and I've got hundreds of them at home, and I'm looking for inspiration for a song or whatever, I can think, well, yeah, I've got something related to that at some stage or another. And it may just be the name of a town to give it colour, or it may be the name of a person, or the mannerisms of somebody, just to give it that, that you're there at the moment, and to bring the whole thing alive. And I find it easier to write it down. I learned it in school. If you write something down, you tend to remember it, and it tends to come alive. Otherwise, it's just some guy told you this. But if you look in your book, it wasn't just some guy that told you this. It was some guy that came into a bar, bought you a drink, and within 15 minutes, you know his whole life story. That's how Ted the Mechanic came about. A guy, and it wasn't based in a strip club. It was basically based in a bar in Vermont. But that doesn't matter. The essence of the whole thing is that this guy was lonely and he wanted to talk, and just wanted, and his ticket was a beer, And I'm going, yeah, I was actually trying to write something else down, and I wrote this whole life story down on the back of about 10 napkins. And that fell out of one of my books when I was repacking after I moved home. Also, I like to make furniture. I like working with wood. So I made a few little pieces that I like, but most of it is just utilitarian. I like banging away with hammers and nails, making fences and things like that.
Can you actually ever sit down and relax, or you tend to find that you've...
Oh yeah, I'll put my feet up and watch the telly, watch a football game, or I like political shows at night. And I'm not a TV fan that much, but special things I can sit down and relax. Yeah, I can read a book. I like going down the pub, a couple of nights a week. Just
staying local.
Yeah, we've got about 14 pubs in my little town.
I've got a few of your mates.
Yeah. And I've got a little mackerel boat, which is a 50-year-old Carvel-built thing. It takes 12 passengers. It's called the Sunbeam. And it goes out of the harbour and in the season from Easter till September.
You can lease it out?
Well, it takes paying passengers. You pick up passengers in the around the harbour, and they come out for a little ride, sightseeing or catching mackerel, whatever. Love diving. I learnt to dive in the Caribbean with my friend Chet, and he taught me very well. He's a marine biologist as well, by way of a second string to his bow, and he's a great teacher. And we had some marvellous adventures down there. And then I did my advanced course, and just as I had to do my deep dive for the advanced course, a ship sank. The freighter that ran between Cayman and Grand Cayman and Cayman Brac turned over in a swell, lost its load, and they were going to blow it up because it was a shipping hazard in 6,000 feet of water in the Cayman Trench. And against all the prevailing tides and winds, it came home into Hogstye Bay in Georgetown. The whole island turned out, and it sank. And it sank where the oil depot was, and its bow was in. And as it sank, it went the right way up again. It just came home. It's a miracle. It was a very spiritual thing, and we dived on it the next morning, and that was my deep dive, 190 feet, and something I shall never forget. I had to make notes as part of the course, and he said, "You're going to knock out definitely at 190 feet," and I didn't. I felt great. Maybe it was the adrenaline or whatever. But it was a terrific experience, and too long to go into now. But I mean, in fact, it ended up being part of a song. There's a song called Cayman Island on an album Roger and I did, accidentally on purpose. And there's a reference to the difference between you and me is I go down on the Kerry Lee. And it's a slightly obtuse reference. But
that particular album, which I think I've seen you have read, you've said is really important to you.
Yeah, it is.
And I would probably have to say it's one of your best works that I appreciate. With Roger, have you any plans to do anything in the future? I know it's 10, 12 years ago now, but to follow up to that?
I think we'd love to. I mean, we've both done other projects and we still do. And I think with that sort of thing, you can't force it when the time is right. There's no doubt about it. The Deep Purple is definitely number one priority in my life at the moment. It doesn't mean to say you've got to eat steak every day, though. You know, I mean, you've got to have a variety of diet, and you've got to. I think it's the first responsibility of any artist is to be expressive. And if you start stifling certain things, or artificially introducing into Deep Purple stuff that really isn't natural for it, then it's fine. Go off and play somewhere and make another album. And I think when the time is right, we'd love to. Accident and Purpose was one of the most important moments of my life. Not the most important, but it was a complete contra situation to everything I've done with Purple, which is normally, even though it's textured and dynamic, it's normally the rock band thing, you know, it's 5 people giving it some.
Was it very difficult?
It was gentle and more emotional. Sorry?
I was saying it was a very difficult period in the band at that time, wasn't it? That 87 period.
We just finished, the reason for that album, in fact, was we just finished The House of Blue Light, just finished recording. Roger's, I mean, his brain was scrambled eggs. I mean, we finished mixing and it was a very hard album to make. The atmosphere in the band was awful. And we just finished in Hamburg. And I said to Roger, let's go and make a record. He looked at me, as he does sometimes, with some justification, as if I got a wheel loose, you know, and but then he flew over. Still in his city hot clothes, he arrived in Montserrat, and we were booked into Air Studios there, and we just started working on this song, which ended up being Dislocated, and we just put a bass line and acoustic guitar down, and went off. And that was the beginning of 1,000 wonderful stories on Montserrat, but went off happy knowing that we were going to make an album that was going to be dear to our hearts. And when I look back on that, and all my friends think it's their favourite album, I think it is my favourite album of the outside Purple stuff. You know.
Yeah, it seems to cross so many borders, that album. I think my grandmother could listen to it, to some mates that are really heavy into rock as well.
Yeah. It inspired me for Dreamcatcher as well. Even though Dreamcatcher was a different kind of thing, it was along the same path where, you know, the tunes are accessible. You can sing them. It's pretty difficult. I sing a lot. I sing when I'm walking down the street. I sing when I'm in the boat. I sing when I'm in the shower. And it's difficult waking up in the morning and singing Speed King, you know. It frightens the kids, and it's like, all the birds bugger off, and it's like, and it's not the sort of thing you want to do before breakfast. But, you know, if you're a singing kind of person or a whistling kind of person, or you know you like to have melodies in your life, then those are the tunes you want, that are accessible and gentle. And I've always had this thing about rock and roll, because I grew up thinking how dynamic and important it was to understand that rock and roll wasn't just Little Richard and Jailhouse Rock with Elvis, both of which are phenomenal in my book. But it was also Buddy Holly and the Everly Brothers. It was also the gentler side of Elvis, and it was also the influences of folk music and stuff that came into the broader spectrum of music. And rock isn't just yelling your head off and thrashing it out, and that's one of the things I love about Deep Purple. It's textured, and they're
light and shade.
Musicians, yeah.
Actually, one thing, talking about Purple, that strikes me is that the impact of Steve Morse is dramatic. He seems to have made a huge difference to the band, and that's not saying the band was going in the wrong direction. He just seems to be brought something that's, you know.
It's easy to say now with five years or so with Steve Morse in the band, but my God, what a difference he made. I mean, there were 2 or 3 elements that are vital. We look back on the Ritchie Blackmore period, because we've had time to recover from it, mostly with affection. We've forgotten most of the garbage that went on, and you tend to look on the bright side, the positive side. That's what we remember. But Purple was going downhill. It was in a nosedive, approaching terminal velocity, and there was no future in it. Then Ritchie left, and we had Joe Satriani for a year, and then unanimously, He was the only name on everyone's list. Steve Morse came into the band. His only question was, is there a dress code? Well, no, come on. And we had a few rehearsals and did some shows in Mexico. And we've been in love ever since. And he's brought into the band not only his personality and enthusiasm, and he's I think, verging on as eccentric as the rest of us, because you do develop an eccentricity in this business. But he's a charming guy. He's a sweet, kind person, and he is very well focused. And he's different. He doesn't fit into the category of everyone else.
He's American.
And he's American, and his roots are different. His roots are in bluegrass and jazz and rock and roll, which is a perspective that none of us had. And he's given us the ability to be a family again. Once that family thing re-emerges, I've spotted in the performance and the attitude of everyone else in the band, first of all, everyone's relaxed because all the tension's gone. And contrary to the theory that one or two people had, it doesn't produce good music. It produces awful music, that constant tension. I think it was just a miracle that any music at all came out of it. But and that tension didn't exist in the early days when the best stuff was done.
It's like rock band's like being in a marriage, really, isn't it? And without sex.
I think so, and I think that confidence has arisen. And now I'm looking at this rhythm section and looking at genre play and the trade-offs and the dangers back in the music again. When I go on stage, it's frightening.
Having seen tapes from the even 72 era, 84 through 87, early 90s and now, to me there's no comparison. The band's really cooking now. And it's a unit, it's a really balanced unit.
And it's matured. It's balanced, it's cooking, it's matured. We're confident with each other. Everyone's looking around, enjoying their music. The audience is very much embraced. They're giving us as much as any of the individuals in the band. They're very much part of it. I think this is why things are happening again now. And I think there's a maturity about the band now. We've gone through the crisis of looking over our shoulder. I think we realised a long time ago that the greatest impediment to our progress was our success, our previous history. And it's very difficult to make progress when you're the only people thinking in that direction. When everyone else is thinking classic rock band, Smoke on the Water, Highway Star, Lazy, it's very hard for you to swim up a waterfall of public opinion and try and alter that thing. Now we've turned it around and people are interested in where the band's going and taking all that on board too.
Is that why you brought some of the more obscure old songs into the set list now, rather than playing some of the old ones that you were forced to probably play for quite a long period of time?
Yeah, I think it's a question of balance. We also play music not just for the sake of the audience, but they have to trust us a little bit that we play for our enjoyment too. And to balance a show, it's got to have peaks and troughs, highs and lows, dynamics, and you have to take people through an experience. If you just hit them at 100 miles an hour and stay at that, it's the enthralling, this feeling is going to disappear very quickly. You get brutalized. And I think the great thing about Purple is that I say they because I'm the singer and I don't consider myself to be a musician. They have the ability to play in a controlled but powerful way. So you feel there's always a little bit more to come. And it does, actually. At moments in time, I'm going, come on, guys. And they're just tails off again. And it's exciting, it's teasing, And it works very well. So the idea of bringing in songs like When a Blind Man Cries or, I can't think of any at the moment, but there are loads of them. The idea of a new song or a group of new songs when you finished a new album and you've got to go on a world tour. First of all, you've got to think about the countries you played in on the last tour, and you don't want to make the mistake of doing an identical show with just some new songs in it. Then you've got to give them their own value, but realise that these songs are just like little children. And every song needs the familiarity of repetition 2 or 3 times. That's what makes hit records on the radio, I think, is, you hear something 2 or 3 times. It has to be a good song, obviously, or has that commercial appeal. But then you need to hear it 2 or 3 times till it becomes an old friend. So what we do is we strike a balance, I think, and pick 2 or 3. We started off with 5 on a band, but we've whittled it down slightly. Songs, and you place them with their older brothers and sisters so that they're sort of walking confidently. and you're not demanding too much of the audience, so that they've just got to listen to a whole string of stuff that they're not familiar with, because that's hard work. And I've looked at what, I admire his work very much, but I know how the audiences feel when they're watching a David Bowie transformation, It's like, oh God, we've got to start all over again. Who's this guy, because he's changed completely. He's metamorphosized again. And I was talking to Robert Plant about this when he was doing his own solo stuff, which I thought was phenomenal. And I said, he said, I don't want to do any Zeppelin stuff at all. I said, well, just one or two, So I would, and it's not going to be the same, obviously, but he said, no, I think it would be under false, I said, do you think they'd come along if you'd never been in Led Zeppelin? Do you think you'd be filling these places? I said, you have to think, that there is a crossover. They'll give you all the time in the world, the audience, I believe, to develop and mature and metamorphosize or whatever you want to do. But give them some tenuous link with the past to tell them that they're there for the right reasons, and that all their dreams from the past aren't being rubbished. So I think a lot of that, it goes into the thinking, and it's different for everybody. That's not a criticism, by the way. It's just it's a difference of opinion. That's all.
Do you associate with other industry people, other guys like Robert Plant these days, or do you tend to find that everyone's so busy on the road you just don't? Do you cross paths on tours, or?
We do sometimes, and we always. It's a very amicable thing. Everyone's known each other for so long. We leave cryptic messages in airports and hotel lobbies and things like that. And of course, at festivals, it's great. Some of the European and South American festivals, you tend to meet up again with bands that you haven't seen for a long time, and old friends that you actually have been in bands with. I mean, Yannick Gers and myself used to work together a long time ago, and he's been with Iron Maiden now for years, and we often bump into each other. But no, when I get off the road, I don't even mix with the guys in Purple. I think this is normal. This tour we're doing now started in Istanbul in June, and it will finish in July. A year later, there's a 13-month tour, which is sort of in the middle. They last from a year to 18 months, the tours generally. And after that, that's your business done, and that's your musical family packed up and sent away. And you go back and re-establish your ties with your domestic family, and spend a good time at home then, and enjoy that. And then the process starts all over again. And basically, it's a procreative thing. Whatever you've experienced or noted or felt turned on by, whether it's folk music or a football match or whatever it might be, it's there to be written down for your next album. I was in Tbilisi in Georgia once and heard the most amazing song being sung by 4 girls, and through the interpreter I said, is this a traditional Georgian folk song? No, this is when Uncle Harry got married about last year. We wrote this song about the wedding and the feast, and everyone came for weeks, and everyone got drunk and misbehaved, and this is the song about. And I'm thinking, and that other song, what was that? No, that's when we beat Moscow Dynamo in the European Cup final. And I'm thinking, that is folk music. That's what it used to be. Folk music, really, we grew to understand it as Peter, Paul and Mary and Pete Seeger and not Bob Dylan so much, but that's contemporary stuff. But that grew out of that genre and that way of approaching things. Whereas folk music all over the world really means the day-to-day catalogue of events, so that you can pass it down to your children. Before we had records, before we had, the people who couldn't read, they would pass their music down through song. I mean, primitive people. And it became sophisticated and controlled and contrived, and then all of a sudden, now the producer's the most important thing, or the radio station or the magazine. And I think that this is one of the things about rock music, that if you can hang a hook on to something that really comes from inside you, that's touched you, no matter how bad it is, people love it. I do. I know when something's genuine. That's why I think the songs of the Kinks and the Beatles and stuff like that you knew where it was coming from. It was coming right out from inside them. It's things that they'd touched, streets they'd been on, you could smell it and feel it. And I think that's the essence of music. And right now, I think the future of music, if there is a future, lies in folk music. It really lies in, and I'm listening to a lot of Russian stuff and Greek and Turkish and South American, and thinking, these are the countries I've been in, these are the friends I've made, and so I should be touched by their music. And